But there is a sentiment out there. The sentiment is let the economic crisis happen. Again, shades of Rahm Emanuel, it's the best way to make people open to change, change being the one world system. And so let a crisis happen. The bigger the crisis, the more willing America will be to go along with evil.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, and that's ultimately my point. And some people believe that could happen as soon as the middle of next year.
Yes.
Others believe it may drag on for a few more years. As long as Obama gets his way and he's able to move us into the New World Order without a bigger crisis, then, you know, the globalists will applaud him. They'll just say, hey, this is great. Let's just keep going down the path we're going down. Because they will pay a price as well. I'm talking about the Europeans particularly. Mm-hmm. If the U.S. goes down, because the U.S. buys so many of their products, and even in the U.K. where I just was, their economy is hurting too. Not as bad as the U.S. I believe the U.S. is going to bear the brunt of it this time. But the powers in Europe will pay a price as well. And so before they take us that final step into full-blown crisis, I think they will do that only if things aren't going to move their direction as quickly as they want to go in. And that could happen because the United States is waking up, and people now are protesting. They're appalled at the amount of money being spent that's mortgaging our future. I found out recently that a 20-year-old entering the workforce during his working career, if he works till he's 70 years old, over a 50-year period, right now would pay approximately $150,000 in taxes alone on the interest, just the interest on our federal debt. And that's going up daily. And so it's getting to the point where unless our government spending is immediately cut by about one-third, which I do not see that happening, we're in deep trouble. And if Obama were to cut the government by a third, it would take about 20 to 30 years for us to get back to normal. But eventually, it would happen. It would take almost an entire generation.
Yes.
But again, I don't see that taking place. And so by next summer or going into 2011, if things aren't moving along as fast as the globalists want, don't be surprised if they pull the plug on us. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Now, I need to talk to you for just a few minutes about Obama's speech to the United Nations rather recently. Here's what Mona Charen says. She writes on National Review Online. Her headline is Obama's self-worship, and then she says President Obama's speech at the UN has been called naive and even post-American. It was something else as well, the most extravagant excursion into self-worship we have yet seen in an American leader. And also, Obama took a pretty serious swipe at Israel. John Bolton came on right after the speech by Obama and said it was almost unprecedented by an American president. Although it received great applause in the anti-Israel audience there at the United Nations. What are your thoughts here on Israel and where she fits into this great big picture in light of the fact that the most powerful country in the entire world has turned against her in a very stunning manner?
Well, you know, when you have Muammar Gaddafi of Libya speaking at the United Nations and referring to Obama as our son, you know, you understand that the radical forces in the Middle East see Obama as being on board with them for the most part. Not all of them, but many of them. And so he's getting a lot of favor among Arab Muslim radicals, and this is helping him exert more and more pressure on Israel. It's no coincidence that back in, I think it was in early July, Obama, Tony Blair, and Pope Benedict, all within a few days of each other, used almost identical terminology to call for a two-state solution in Israel. To me, it appeared that it was coordinated. It was in rapid-fire fashion, and I believe it was designed to put Benjamin Netanyahu in a real corner so that he fully realizes that basically the whole world is against him and will capitulate. And I do feel for that man because if you put yourself in his shoes right now, and you've got this little tiny country, Israel, and only about half of the people in your country are with you. And then you've got the leader of the United States, former leader of the UK, and a pope, all publicly calling for a two-state solution. What are you going to do? You know, and Netanyahu to stand up against these men would have to be willing to basically go it alone and then have public world opinion and all the media against him for doing so. And so he has recently caved in some on that. However, he's stood firm on Jerusalem for the time being. A lot of people aren't aware of this, Jan. Back in June, on Jerusalem Day, President Obama had conspired, if I can use that term, with King Abdullah of Jordan to fly the UN flag at the Western Wall in Jerusalem on Jerusalem Day. And Netanyahu found out about it, and he basically said, no, not on my watch. This isn't going to take place. And he gave a brief speech and said, as long as he's there, it's going to be the Israeli flag that flies over the Kotel, not the UN flag. And so he defied them on that occasion. But that tells us where all this is going. The fact that these men want to fly the UN flag over Jerusalem tells us that their goal is to eventually internationalize Jerusalem and take away control of Jerusalem from the Jews, have an international force in there, either from the EU or through the UN, to enforce some type of mandate, which then would allow whoever is in charge of Jerusalem, I'm talking about from an international standpoint, to be able to do whatever they want to do there. It will become an international city if these people have their way. And, of course, if you're a Bible prophecy student, you know that would fully set the stage for the Antichrist to step on the scene and for all the other pieces to fall in place. So we're getting real close to that point.
Folks, if you've joined us late again, you're listening to The Voice, my guest this hour, of Gary Kah. You can contact him at GaryKah.org. That's spelled K-A-H, GaryKah.org. He's got all sorts of products available there. Sign up for his print newsletter. And let's see here. You are listening to Understanding the Times. Jan Markell, your host here. Let's quickly move, Gary Kah, into this issue of radical environmentalism, because this, too, is a part of this New World Order. They're seizing on it. For instance, as we speak, farmers in California are going out of business because the radical wacko environmentalists want to protect some kind of a little tiny smelt. And they're pushing, this environmentalism is pushing an extreme agenda. And this is part of the globalization plan. And I was saying up to 3-4 years ago, pollution knows no borders, so let's have no borders.
Yeah, their slogan has been global problems demand global solutions.
Right.
And so the environment, because of its very nature, because it transcends national boundaries, has been a perfect issue to be manipulated by globalists. There are definitely some problems with the environment, and I'm not one who says let's go out and trash the planet. I think we need to be careful and do what we can.
Absolutely.
But what I am opposed to is the manipulation of the issue to argue that we have to have a world government to solve this crisis. And back in the 80s, an organization that I was invited to join, the World Constitution and Parliament Association, I wrote about it in my first book, En Route to Global Occupation, and actually reproduced some of their documents at the back of the book. They had a page they put out. It was a list of 49 reasons for why we need world government, and something like 15 of them had to do with the environment and ecology. So I began telling people back in the 80s, just look out. This is going to be the big issue that they're going to use to try to bring all of this in. And then when you have the Pope come out in July openly calling for a world political authority with real teeth to be able to deal with some of these issues, including the environment, you realize we're pretty far down the road.